Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about something very exciting. So, if you aren't already aware, I am someone who reads a lot of front list. So I am constantly looking up what books to come out in the next 6 months, a year, and yeah, kind of adding them to a list. And half of those are usually books by debut authors, or maybe it's their second book, and I just wasn't interested in their first, but I am in their second one. But the other half are usually from authors I've read before and loved, and I just keep checking that author's name. And so I spent some time a couple of weeks ago looking up books that I wanted to pick up next year. And in doing that, I was searching a lot of authors I really wanted another book from and finding out whether I could be excited and add a book of theirs to the list or be annoyed, impatient, disappointed, frustrated, and have to keep waiting longer. And once I did that, I thought there's actually a list of people that I am impatiently waiting for a new book from. Some more justifiably impatient than others in terms of how long a gap it's been since they last brought a book out. And I thought, I think that list is a good representation of my reading tastes, and yeah, just happy to kind of recommend these authors to you. And if you haven't picked up some of their books, whilst we wait for the next one, you could pick up one of these books. And these are authors and novels that I'm always happy to shout about because I think they're brilliant. So I ended up with 10 authors, just happened to be 10, and I thought I would put them in order of the authors I'm most justified in being impatient about. So the author who has had the biggest gap since publishing their last book, all the way up into me being just, very unfair, and they only actually had a book come out, a couple of years ago. I haven't allowed myself to include any authors on this list who have had a book come out in the last 24 months, because I think that's just, really unfair. Even though some authors do bring books out quite regularly, but I thought that was taking it a bit too far. So these are all authors who haven't had a book out since 2019 and before. So let's crack on. The first one, who I think a lot of people will have on the list, and she is an author we are used to waiting on her books, is of course Donna Tartt. Now it's been over 20 years since her first book came out, The Secret History, and in fact I haven't read this book since I was 16. I'm now 34. When I started my English A-level, they gave us a list of books to pick one to read from over the summer, and then in our first class we would do an icebreaker where we spoke about the book we read and on our thoughts on it, and that would kind of just open the discussion up between the class. And me being me at the time, I read nearly all the books on the list, but the one that I enjoyed the most was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. But I haven't really read it since because, I kind of started this channel in my early 20s and haven't been much of a rereader, and now I kind of live in fear that this book wouldn't speak to me as much as it did as a young reader, but I do still intend to reread it and perhaps break my heart and not love it as much. But since then, I did also read The Little Friend, which I know a lot of people haven't enjoyed. They think it's her weakest novel. I think I probably actually prefer this to her most recent novel. I think this book is incredibly slow moving, and that's an issue a lot of people have with it. But out of, I've read over 1,000 books in the last 10 years, and there's some scenes in this book that stick out to me more than lots of scenes I've read. And I read this book probably 9 or 10 years ago, so I think that speaks a lot for it. And then of course her most recent book came out in 2013, so it has been over 10 years, and that is The Goldfinch. And I remember struggling with this a fair amount when I read it, and at some points having to kind of push myself to pick it back up. I think I still loved it in the end, but I am unsure if this is one I would love as much on a reread. So I would like to reread all 3 of these, but I would also very much like a new novel from this author. She does always take at least 10 years between each novel, so it feels like around now is the point at which it's okay to start demanding a new book. And I haven't really heard any whispers, so do let me know if you've heard anything about Donna Tartt bringing out a new book anytime soon. Then next we have my favourite author of all time, and that is Sarah Waters. Now she does have 6 books out, 3 of which I've read twice and the other 3 of which I've only read once. So I am still planning to go back and do some rereads to kind of pass the time. But the last time she had a book out was 2014, so it has been 10 years. There were whispers a few years ago of the time period she was planning on focusing on in her upcoming book, but those whispers seem to have died away, and I haven't heard much of anything about her having a new book coming out. But yeah, she's been writing over a long period, and she does tend to have books come out, I think, every kind of 5 or 6 years, although there was a really big gap between her last 2 books, so I think she's kind of becoming that type of writer more. So her first one is, of course, Tipping the Velvet, and that one I've only read once. Affinity, also only read once, and I would like to reread this one this winter. Then we have Fingersmith, which I reread quite recently and always stood in my mind as my favourite, and on a reread I kind of changed my mind about that. I still really enjoyed it, but not as much as these next 3. I actually think, yeah, her 3 most recent books are my favourite, and that's Night Watch. Again, read this one twice, listened to it on audio, and it's brilliantly performed, as is my favourite one, that being The Little Stranger. This is a kind of horror novel, and I just think it's really intelligent, and I highly recommend it both in physical form and on audio. And then finally, one, when I read it, I remember feeling like, I think a lot of Sarah Wars fans felt disappointed by this most recent novel, and I still really enjoyed it, and I still felt like it was a 5-star read, but I felt like it was maybe like a weaker Sarah Waters book. But I reread this one this year, and I just had an amazing time with it. I just think sentence for sentence, she's like the best writer out there. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And that is The Paying Guest. Now, this is the chunkiest of her novels. I think this one is it's around 570 pages. So I think if that's the direction she's going in, we're going to have to keep having these kind of long waits between her bringing new novels out. But yeah, I would very much like a new book to read from Sarah Waters. Then we have a few here that are all from debut authors. So they've only released one book. I've read that one book, absolutely loved it. And then, yeah, been kind of eagerly anticipating their next book and have been waiting for longer than I would have liked to wait. So Laura Kay brought out English Animals in 2017. I reread this one, I think early this year, maybe late last year. And yeah, absolutely adored it. This is one of those books that I think of the most when I'm thinking about books I love and would enjoy a reread of. This one comes to mind. Like, this might sound really ridiculous to say, but I don't know if a week goes by when I don't think about English Animals by Laura Kay. I don't know what it is about this novel. It just really works for me. And she's one of those writers where when I read this debut novel, at the same time as loving this book, I was already so excited about what she could possibly do in the future. I just think, I don't know, the way in which she writes just really suits my reading taste, both in terms of writing style, but also the themes she's interested in exploring. I absolutely adored this one. Like, thought it was amazing on a reread. This is one of those books, when I was a teenager, I used to reread like almost solidly. Like, I didn't often pick up a new to me book, and I would finish a book and then immediately reread it. And maybe I might do that like 5 times in a row with the same novel. This is one of those books that I would have done that with, and would have just felt really, you know, when you like get to know a world really well and you feel kind of really safe in it, and yeah, you kind of feel like you inhabit that space when you're reading it. That's how I kind of feel about this one, and I just, yeah, really love a new novel from Laura Kay. Then a lot of people love this next one, and this one was really raved about when it came out in 2018, and that is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. I reread this one, I think, early last year, so again, I've read this one twice. This is, you know, has features of some of my favourite types of books, in that this is a family drama that is told from the perspectives of different members of the family, which is something I love. It also is told in different time points in the family's lives, which is again something I adore. And also it's non-chronological, so some of those perspectives are kind of out of order, which again is something I love. So when you combine those things, I am very, very happy. I thought this was spectacularly written. I think it examined some really complex themes within a family, that kind of loyalty and deep love and affection you feel for your family, at the same time as maybe having really fraught relationships with these people, and then making you feel maybe the biggest failure you could possibly feel compared to the way other people in your life might make you feel. I think this book was really tender, and again, an author I'm super excited to see what she writes next. And I know lots of people are eagerly awaiting her next novel. This next book came out in 2020, this author's debut novel, and I'm always happy to feature this in a video because I don't think it got enough buzz. It actually got some, kind of less than positive reviews. And I think this is one of those maybe kind of Marmite books because the protagonist, I think to a lot of people, is quite unlikable. I found her deeply relatable, so maybe that's why I enjoyed this one more. That is White Ivy by Susie Yang. I always hold this up as the book that I think is closest to Donna Tartt, The Secret History, in terms of writing style. I think a lot of people, when they do recommendations for books like The Secret History, they're focusing on the themes of dark academia. And this book isn't focused on that, although there are some elements that are set in a school, but it really has a similar writing style. Susie Yang really has this kind of luscious, decadent prose. This book is really interested in privilege and wealth and the way in which those things can hold power, which is something I think Donna Tartt is really examining in The Secret History. So as soon as I read this, I was just like, please tell me she has other novels out there. And then I realised this was her debut novel. Again, one of those authors, if I heard she had a new book out, I would honestly be so happy. This is one of those books I would pick up her new release on release day. Just can't wait to see what she does next. And also in 2020, Cara Spray brought out her most recent book. Now, Cara Spray has written 4 books. I've read all 4 of them, and I just have a real affection for her writing. Her writing is very homely to me. It's really focused on the type of people I know. I find her books sentimental in a good way, and I think that's a really fine line to walk. And I just feel very much known by the type of people she writes about. And I'm always happy to get lost in one of her books. So her debut novel is the one that's probably the most well known, and that is A Song for Issy Bradley. This is a beautiful, grief-filled family drama, which my mum recently read on my recommendation, and us talking about it really made me think, why haven't you reread this one yet? So you need to do that. She also has a short story collection out called Sweet Home. I remember reading this on the way to work on a bus, and I remember exactly where I was on the bus journey because of how kind of moved I was by some of these stories. And this always stands out to me as a short story collection I really enjoyed, even though a lot of the stories in this are quite short, like less than 10 pages, which isn't usually what I like out of a short story collection. But I just remember this one being really impactful, and again, need to reread it. Then we have The Museum of You by Cara Spray, and I thought the other day that I might actually reread this one quite soon and get my mum to reread it, because this again is a novel that focuses on grief. This is about a father raising his young daughter and not being sure how to talk to her about the loss of her mother, and you hear from both of their perspectives. But the father in this is actually a bus driver, and a lot of his sections are his days at work and his thoughts as he's driving his bus routes. And my mum has recently become a bus driver. She absolutely loves it. And I was thinking that's not something you really see portrayed that often in novels. And when you do see them portrayed in films, they're not really the main character. And so I thought it would be really cool for us both to kind of read this and then chat about it and see if my mum thinks this was a very good representation of what it's like to be a bus driver. But one I'm definitely going to read is the most recent novel she had that came out in 2020, and that is When the Lights Go Out. And the reason I'm going to reread this one as soon as possible is because this is set in the build up to Christmas, and then it features Christmas Day. And this book, I think, came out in the summer in 2020, and I wanted to read it straight away, so I did. So I didn't read it around Christmas time, and I don't think it's that common for literary fiction to feature Christmas and the Christmassy season within them. Sometimes if they're set over a broader period of time, Christmas might factor in, but this is set kind of completely in December, I think. And I don't think that happens that often. I really enjoyed this, found this really readable, but just think it would be nice to read it around Christmas time. I think this book should have been released around Christmas time, but I think maybe the publisher was fearful of marketing it as a kind of Merry Christmas book, which it certainly isn't. But I really enjoyed this. A really good family drama, but it's mainly set inside the home, so it's quite insular, with these people kind of rubbing each other up the wrong way. And I really like the conclusion this one came to. So we'll definitely be rereading this. But we haven't had a novel from her since 2020, and she brings her books out fairly regularly. So yeah, I was kind of expecting to see that she had a novel coming out next year. It hasn't been announced yet. But as with all of these authors, if you've heard anything that I haven't about them possibly having another book out, if you've been to some type of author event and they were there and they mentioned something, then please do let me know down below. And then next we have Frances Cha, who released If I Had Your Face in 2020. This was a really popular release in 2020, really widely acclaimed, and I didn't really see anyone talk about this one who didn't enjoy it. So I went in with a little bit of trepidation, and I actually ended up really enjoying it. I think similarly to Caris Bray, she writes in a way that is at once literary but also incredibly readable. Like, I think I read this in 1 or 2 sittings. This again is a multiple perspective novel, which is something I love. And this focuses on 4 women, which is something, again, I really enjoy when all the point of view characters are women. In this, it's set in Seoul in South Korea, and we follow these 4 women who live in the same apartment block. I think 3 of them actually live in an apartment together. And then we also see this other woman who's on the periphery. I think she lives with her husband in her apartment. And each of these characters in their own way is kind of tangled up with an obsession with beauty and an obsession with making money in order to make themselves more beautiful. And it's about the societal expectations put on these young women, why they feel this way, and how much their worth is tied up to the way in which they look. And I thought this book was, just super entertaining, super readable, but at the same time really smart and thought-provoking. And again, just one of those authors, when you read this as a debut novel and you think this just has so much strength to it, if this is what you're doing as your first novel, like, what will you do with your next ones? So again, really excited to see what she brings out next. Then Kyle Lucia Wu had a book come out in 2021, so it's only been a few years, but still I feel like I'm allowed to be a little bit impatient here. And that is Win Me Something. Again, this is a book I like to rave about in these types of videos because I didn't see many people talk about this one, and this is quite a quiet, slow novel. It's not got any kind of explosive moments in it, and that's perhaps why this book is kind of easily forgotten amidst lots of other books that have much more explosive plots to them. But I just really enjoyed this novel, and I thought it was really smart in its subtlety, and I felt that it had a lot of emotional impact in the nuanced discussions it was having. It never kind of spelled things out for you. I think she handled everything with a great deal of tact, and I just really liked the voice of this character. So this follows a biracial Chinese American young woman. It's kind of a coming of age novel. She's in her early to mid 20s, and she's kind of unsure what she wants to do with her life. She feels like she's kind of ambling around, and she feels like everybody around her has more direction, and she just feels really lost. And she starts to nanny for this wealthy white family. She's a live-in nanny, and it's about that experience, and you see her relationship with the child she's caring for, and also her kind of complex, tense relationship with both the mother of that child and the uncle of that child. There are some really tense scenes in this. I think this book has some shared themes with something like Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid, but with a much quieter plot. But I just really enjoyed seeing through this character's eyes. I can sometimes find characters who are a bit kind of inactive, frustrating, a bit passive would be the better word to use here. But I didn't find Willa frustrating. I found her completely relatable, and I really felt for her and felt really sad for her in the positions her employers put her in. And this is again one I'd happily just like pick up and reread. So just interested to see, as I'm saying about all of these, what this author brings out next. It's not just the being able to like read what they bring out next, it's just like when you initially get to read the blurb and hear what it's going to be about. I love that kind of ziggy moment of excitement, and just can't wait for that. This next book I was just hunting for on my shelves, and I was absolutely certain I had a copy of it because I remember getting that copy and it's sitting on my shelves, and I've just realised that I've lent it to my friend. So I will bully her into reading it quickly so I can get it back. And that is We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Sayan. This was such an amazing debut novel. I urge you to pick this one up if you haven't already. I thought it was so entertaining, so smart, so compelling. I just felt really rocked by the discussions within this novel. This is again multiple point of view. And we are following a young man who is a young Muslim man whose parents moved to Uganda, and kind of made a life there, and then eventually left to move to England. But he's kind of really struggling with his life. I think he works in banking and he's not really happy. And he decides to go back to Uganda and try and kind of find out more about his family's history there. But you're also hearing from the perspectives of someone, I think his uncle, and you're kind of hearing their story in the past, and you're reading some letters, and you realise there's a really complicated history between these two families, one being the Black Ugandans and the other being the immigrants who came into Uganda from Pakistan. And there's lots of complexities to do with land ownership and the right to earn wealth there, and the right to feel that that's your home. And yeah, these kind of broader themes are discussed on this really minute level between these two families, and it is just so compelling. And I felt really interested when I was in either perspective. I really enjoyed reading about the places she was writing about, and I just felt really excited reading this, what she would have to offer in the future, with this just being a debut novel. So I would love to see her name come up with a new book coming out. And then finally we have Carla Neblett. She released a debut novel called King of Rabbits in 2021. And joy is a weird word for this one, because this book is actually pretty emotionally devastating. So I would caveat any recommendation for this book with highlighting that. This book is dual perspective, but unusually it's dual perspective from the same character. We open in the kind of present day of the novel when Kai, we're just checking his name, is around, I think, 15 or 16, and he is clearly incredibly depressed. He's really struggling with just getting through the day. He's struggling to emotionally connect to anybody, and he appears to be very lost. And you're watching him try and survive in that time period, but you're also, in another perspective, seeing him grow up and from being a young boy in primary school, and that storyline gradually builds up to the point when you realise why he's so depressed in the current day. And this book is one of those books that kind of answers lots of interests I have as a reader. This book is about a working class family. That's something that I really like to read about. I find it very relatable. It's also about a family who live in a rural area, and I think quite often when we read about people in a rural area, we read about firstly white people, secondly wealthy people, and then we often read about people in a rural area who live in like an isolated house. And I think it's really important to remember that there are rural areas where people still live like within a community, within a residential street. And so I really like that. I really like reading about this mixed race boy and his kind of confusion about his family and his identity and his kind of struggles to fit in. And I just thought all of this was written really effectively. I think it must be really hard to write about these type of topics without it feeling like that kind of like poverty porn aspect. I think it must be really hard if you come from a place like Kai does as a character, to write about your lived experiences and not kind of commodify them for readers who aren't from your background. And I think she struck that perfectly. And this book was, like I said, just really devastating. And there's lots of scenes from this I can just completely remember. And yeah, wholeheartedly want to reread this one. And yeah, I'm super excited to see what she does next. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know I love like a coming of age novel. So you're pretty much, you know, if your first novel has themes I like and it's coming of age, then yeah, I'm always going to pick it up. But it's always exciting to see what they do after a coming of age novel, because in my mind I just wanted to write another one, but of course that's silly. And so yeah, I'm interested to see what type of character she writes about in her next book. And then I have 3 bonus picks, right? Because these authors would 100% have made the cut for this video. But when I looked them up, they actually did have an upcoming novel announced with a blurb, but no publication date. So I felt like I wanted to include them because, you know, they are some of the top authors I want books from. But it wouldn't be fair to include them with the others, because there definitely is a new book coming out. We just don't know when. And it can be that, you know, I've got carried away with this in the past, where I've heard about a book coming out that has a title and a blurb, and I thought, oh God, it must be next year then. And then sometimes you wait like several more years because the author is still like spending lots of time refining that book, or the publication process takes a while, or like whatever, something else happens. And so I thought it was fair for me to include these authors here, but like, you know, as little like additional notes, because yeah, these books could come out next year, and that is what I wish for, but we shall see. So firstly, we have Tayari Jones. Now I think most people know Tayari Jones from her most recent novel, which came out in 2018, and that is An American Marriage. Now I loved An American Marriage. I listened to it on audio. It was one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. And yeah, I 100% need to reread it. But I've also read her other 3 novels. They are The Untelling, Leaving Atlanta, and my personal favourite of all of her books, Silver Sparrow. And she's become one of my favourite authors. I think she's an amazing writer. And one thing I always say about Tayari Jones when I talk about her writing style is that she puts you in the room with these people, with this place. She writes brilliantly about all the senses. She always describes texture and touch and smell and space. And so I get a real feel for all of her characters, and I just adore the way she writes. And so, really wanted her to have a new novel out. And when I looked her up, I stumbled across this description. She has a book coming out called Old Fourth Ward, which tells the story of Jaybird Alexander, who, when facing a threat from a dangerous boyfriend, reaches out to her absent father for help. He drives overnight to rescue her and brings her home to live with him. After a year, her mother relocates to Atlanta to be near her daughter, even though she has lost custody. Soon, Jaybird has 2 mothers and 2 families, a biological one living in a dilapidated house in the Old Fourth Ward, and a stepmother in the affluent neighbourhood of Cascade Heights. Years later, when Jaybird is happily married and living in Brooklyn, her husband collapses of a heart attack, and she gets 2 phone calls, both mothers urging her to come home. So yeah, I think that sounds amazing. I think she writes about the interactions between family members and their kind of tangled loyalties, like to perfection. So I really hope this one is a 2026 release. The next author is Mira Jacob. She released the absolutely fantastic The Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing in 2014. I've read this book twice, loved it just as much both times. It features lots of my favourite things about novels, family drama, multiple POV, mixed timelines, lots of kind of tension and secrets that need to be resolved between these family members. I just think she writes absolutely brilliantly. And I also absolutely love, and this is probably one of my favourite books of all time, and again I've read this a couple of times, Good Talk, a memoir and conversations. This is a kind of personal essay collection told as a graphic memoir. All the pages look like this. They are either photographs or just different cutouts of things, and then they feature these kind of cut out characters she's drawn to represent her family and her friends. And I just thought this was spectacular. Really intelligently tackles the struggles of being a parent raising a child of colour in contemporary America, and the kind of difficult discussions that you need to have with your children, and the kind of difficult discussions you sometimes want to avoid with people you love because they think abhorrent things. And I just think this is brilliantly executed, like put together. It's amazing. And so I was eagerly anticipating whatever she had coming out next. And the reason I found out about this is because this was in like a major bidding war, and it's already been bought by, I think, a TV network to make this into a TV show, which is always exciting when like the book hasn't even got a publication date and it's already been bought to be made into a TV show. And the book is called We Killed Angie Alexander, and it sounds quite different compared to what she's previously written. Themes similar, but like plot a bit more out there, I think. It says, We Killed Angie Alexander is a kaleidoscopic mystery exploring who's behind the murder of a white passing Indian actress as through the eyes of all those watching her and grappling with race, feminism, addiction and celebrity. And yet it was in a deal for 7 figures at auction. So that happened, and then it's already got a TV deal. So I'm super happy for her. Like, that's amazing to see. You know, a lot of authors have other jobs, and that's why we you know, rightly so, have to wait quite a while for new books. It's always lovely to see when someone, yeah, kind of gets, you know, financial gain for the work they're doing, and like, I hope that allows them more time to kind of kind of breathe a bit easier and not have to work quite as hard as I know a lot of writers with full-time day jobs do. And then finally, we have a new book coming out from T. Kiramadin, who wrote Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls, which is a memoir written in a collection of personal essays that came out in 2019. It is perhaps my favourite non-fiction book of all time. It is one of my favourite books of all time in general. It is beautiful. Her writing style is magical, crisp, really emotive, super nostalgic, filled with nostalgia for girlhood and in childhood. It's kind of aching in how bittersweet it is, and she has a real kind of complex, messy relationship with both her mother and her father, and the book really tackles that, and I just thought it was like perfection. And so I immediately wanted her to have another book out, and this was actually announced quite soon after that. I've known about this book for a couple of years, and I check really regularly, like almost monthly, as to see whether this book has a release date yet, and it doesn't. But by God, does it sound like a book I not only really want to read, but also I'm so glad that it's T. Kiramadin who's written this book. And that book is Whidbey. It says that it is a complex whodunit told from the alternating perspectives of a survivor of child sex abuse, the abuser's mother, and a best-selling memoirist who wrote about him in the days following his murder. It is an exploration of the contradictory pursuit of justice and revenge in the aftermath of carceral and human violence. I mean, yeah, all those things are things I'm really interested in. I think about the justice system a lot, and I think about memoirists a lot and what they owe to the people they're writing about, what we mean by truth and memory, and that's some of the things that T. Kiramadin did touch on in her memoir, and so I think she'll handle this so well, and I am like so excited. This is probably a book I've been more excited about than any books in like a few years. So literally cannot wait for this one to have a release date. So those are all the authors that I am demanding a new book from. Please let me know if you've read and enjoyed any of these authors' books, if you are eagerly anticipating books from them, and of course I would love to know which authors you would include on a list like this if you were making it, which authors you're impatient to get a new book from. Please let me know down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.